Geass took a lot of inspiration from Neon Genesis Evangelion. But it actually wasn't the only one. In fact, the anime we're going to talk about today, good transition, right, to the review is going to be RAXEPHON, which is another anime that took inspiration from Neon Genesis Evangelion. It also took inspiration for anime as well, including one called Yushuo Raiden, which came out in 1970. There's a couple of disclaimers I want to mention before going into the actual story itself. Number one, the anime is very dense for 26 episodes, and if you watch it the first time, or if you've already seen it, then you know what I'm talking about. It is extremely confusing, and you're probably going to have to watch it again. You might have to watch some guides, read on the Wikipedia page. It's one of those type of anime, and given how it's a legacy, or not legacy, kind of similar to Evangelion, kind of, comes with the territory. There's also a film that came on later on after the anime, which I thought was just a recap film that didn't really introduce anything new. And while it follows basically the same timeline, there are critical changes they make in trying to summarize the entire anime into like a single motion picture. And all I would say is you should probably watch that film because it actually fills in a lot of the gaps that the show doesn't have. And I think you can't get a complete picture unless you watch the two series. Well, the one series and the film. So that's like my one disclaimer. The other thing I should mention too is that I will compare RAXEPHON to Evangelion throughout this discussion, but I'm not going to do a full in-depth because there's a lot of areas where the two shows similar but also differ. Maybe in the future I'll do a comparison. Again, discussing things not Code Geass related isn't always the best, but I would like to compare them because they are very similar stories. So there will be some like references to Evangelion and discussing RAXEPHON, but generally speaking, I'm going to try to keep it non-related to Evangelion. Because while RAXEPHON has some elements, I think it differentiates itself enough that you can watch it without saying, oh, that's just a clear clone of Evangelion. And the reason why I have to make that point is that because there were anime that came out right after Evangelion that were just blatant rip-offs, soulless clones of Evangelion. I can't think of one on top of my head, but when I was doing research on different anime, specifically mechas, I saw a bunch of like, this is a soulless copy of Evangelion. So RAXEPHON, I feel like, doesn't take everything from Evangelion and because it adds something of its own, it's totally fine in that regard. I don't mind copying different shows as long as you put something new of your own, which creates something entirely different. Because at the end of the day, we've told the same story for years. I forgot who said it, but there's like 7 different stories we tell, and that's it. Everything is based on the 7 stories. So there's nothing really original anymore, but it is fun when someone takes a pre-existing idea and builds on it or changes it into their own form, which is ironic because that's one of the themes of RAXEPHON without spoiling it. Okay, so now let's get into the actual plot. I can go on all day. I can ramble all day about it, but we don't have all the time for that. We could bear it till like the sun burns out. Anyhow, the plot of the anime is simply this. So you got this main character, Yato. He's 17. He lives in Tokyo. And one day, ships come and attack the city. And then these other fighting weapons attack them as well. They're actually called Dolons. We'll get into that a little later. And throughout this chaos, he's on a train with a couple of his friends. And he sees one of his friends, Hiroku, her Asahina, by the way. No relation to Asahina of the Four Holy Swords from Code Geass. Anyhow, she falls and he sees her hand. I believe it was her hand, and she's bleeding. And they emphasize that her blood is red, which is very important later on in the story. So he runs away from her because he want to get help, whatever the case may be. And eventually he runs into a woman named Haruka, who defends him against these 2 government agents that tried to kidnap him in the response to a mysterious lady, which I won't give out her identity because, no spoilers. But anyhow, she defends him off against agents. She beats both of them up, and they have blue blood. And they emphasize the blue blood because you just saw red blood. And Haruka asks him the question, or not asks him, but proposed something to him, which we were all thinking ourselves, which is why is it they have blue blood versus humans who have red blood? And that's because these people are Mulians, which are a race of aliens that came to Earth many years ago. It's actually more like thousands. I don't want to. The problem with RAXEPHON, the problem with discussing in a non-spoiler review is that every episode, in a sense, has a huge revelation, and I don't want to spoil too many of them because, the whole story, in a sense, is kind of the reason why you're watching it is to see what the whole the whole bigger picture is. So it's hard to discuss the narrative without revealing too much. So I'm trying my best here to like just don't say that, say this, because yeah, it's one of those type of stories. It kind of reminds me of Steingate a little bit. That's a weird comparison, but in both cases, the story is like you're going through it to find like the big reveal, and RAXEPHON is kind of in the same boat. You're trying to find you want to see what the big reveal is going to be. Anywho, so once he meets up with Haruka, he initially rejects her proposal to go with him. Eventually, after he goes inside of the RAXEPHON, which he's not even sure what happened, but he goes inside this mech with like wings, and we'll get into exactly what the RAXEPHON is without spoiling anything. But anyhow, so he's in the RAXEPHON, he kills a bunch of jets, including, well, not including, but this woman who you see in the very beginning of the episode, take her ships to go into wherever she was going. Again, we'll get that in a second. He kills all the ships except for the one person who's in a red one. They made her red, I guess, so you could identify her among the other ships. Anyhow, after that event, Ayato is kind of scared, so he does go with Haruka, and they escape the current Tokyo they're in. And they couldn't do it originally in this plane because it was remote controlled by the enemy, so they jumped into the RAXEPHON, which Ayato has control over, and there's many reasons why that's the case. And they go in the RAXEPHON, and they escape out of Tokyo, and there's this big planet-shaped thing surrounding it, which looks like Jupiter, which is why they call it Tokyo Jupiter. When he gets out of there, Haruka explains basically that the world you thought you knew isn't the world as is, like the Matrix, same type of big reveal. And he follows her to join Terra, which is an organization fighting against the Mulians, which are the enemies of humanity, as I said earlier. And exactly where they came from and what they're doing, I won't say. But the purpose of this review, they're fighting against them. Now, one of the ways the show is very similar to Evangelion is that it kind of follows a format where a big creature will come, aka a golem, and he'll have to use the RAXEPHON to destroy the golem. In Evangelion, it was angels and Shinji or Asuka, and there was another guy, I forgot his name. They would pilot the Evas to take out the different angels that would appear. So a similar type of scenario where you have a kid who's piloting a mech that's based on the enemy to kill the enemy's mechs. It's a very rinse and repeat formula. You've seen this. Well, now you've seen this, I should say, a bunch of times. And that's the basic setup of the story. There's other elements in play too, like this one reporter who wants to find information. There's the uncle who takes in Ayato, who has like two nieces of his own. Well, supposed nieces. Haruka and Megami. Haruka and Megami, they kind of have similar elements to Asuka and I think her name is Misato. The older woman, who's Misato, takes care of Shinji. And Megami is the young girl who's kind of like Asuka, but she's not as aggressive. She's definitely a Sonora, but I liked her a lot more than Asuka. In fact, that's one thing I should mention like off the bat before I go into the characters. If you were to ask me just a quick answer, which do you like better, RAXEPHON or Evangelion? The answer would be RAXEPHON because I just happen to like the character a lot more. I'm not saying that the characters in Evangelion aren't likable. It's just that I feel like they over-dramatize a lot of stuff. Now, granted, I haven't watched Evangelion in a couple of years, so maybe I'm misremembering things, but the conflicts that happened to these characters, I felt they were more grounded, which is saying a lot considering RAXEPHON is anything but grounded. If you've seen the series, you know what I'm talking about. So the main characters, first you have obviously Ayato, who is a teenager. He's 17 in the story. Kind of like Shinji, he is put into a role where he has to pilot something, seemingly against his will, but obviously he chooses to do it anyways because he wants to save those he loves. And he's fighting against all these different golems, as I said. The battles are more of a mental than physical, which we'll get into later. But the point is he's kind of thrust in this role where he has to save humanity. And he constantly goes back and forth, should we do this or not? And are they using him? Who's friendly? Who's foe? I mean, in this situation, it makes perfect sense. He was with one side his whole life, and all of a sudden he gets dragged to another side of life. And he questions who are the good people, the bad people. And considering how everyone's so vague with telling him information, including a couple revelations, that he questions whose side should he be on? Who should he fight for? And even who should he trust? Because people are kind of a little aggressive to him. Then you have Haruka, who's this 29-year-old woman who is very close to Ayato and wants to protect him. Fun game, by the way. Actually, don't play this, but joking aside, if you were to, or not joking aside, here is the joke, my bad. If you played a game where you take a shot every time Haruka says Ayato, like she screams it, you'll be dead by the end of the series. So don't play this game, but she definitely screams his name a lot. Now, joking aside, she is very close to Ayato and basically is his guardian angel. And I like how the story and again, I can't spoil this, but I like how they explained brilliantly why she is that way, and I kind of predicted it and kind of didn't, so it was nice that the story was like, there's a reason why she likes him so much, and you're like, huh, what is that? And eventually the story hints it throughout, and that's why you have to watch the second time, because the first time you watch it, you just learn the whole plot and how everything came to be. Second time you watch it, you're looking for the hints of, oh, I see, that was okay. You start connecting things into your head, that's why I like shows like this, where there actually is an explanation. There are some stories where the plot is confusing all over the place, and there is no explanation. It's just done for sake of being confusing, where RAXEPHON is actually a puzzle, and all the pieces are given to you, but not always in the way that'd be easy to solve. You have to kind of like put the pieces together, but the pieces are there. What was I saying again? Oh yeah, the characters. So Haruka is also a martial artist. She works for Terra. She's one of their intelligence agents, which makes sense because she's the one who got Ayato out of Toko Jupiter. That's her character in a nutshell. I can't go much further beyond that because if I did, it'd spoil everything. Megumi, like I said before, she's the Asuka of RAXEPHON. And what I like about her character more than Asuka is that her her issues in the story were more relatable. And while she's again a Sundara, I felt like I wasn't as annoyed by her because usually I don't like Sundara characters in general. Especially the really aggressive ones that not only scream but also physically abuse people. That's why I'm not a big fan of Chidori from Full Metal Panic, although she gets a lot better in Second Rate, but still, she's kind of annoying in that regard. Whereas with Megumi, I understood why she was aggressive initially towards Ayato, but she's generally a good person, and when she does go through certain issues in the story, it's like, okay, I understand how you feel, I'd be upset too. And there's a really good scene, and I won't say what the reason was, but they both were, her and Ayato, they're on the side of like the door, and they're both explaining like a big revelation story that was completely two different ones for each of them individually, but it was still the same type of issue they were dealing with, which was people hiding the truth from them, and everyone knew except for them. Good scenes like that. You also have the leader of Terra, which I forgot his name. That's why I'm looking to the side here to get his exact name here. Jin Kunigi, who kind of like Shinji's father, although unlike Shinji's father, he's actually a nice guy and he's a good person. He's not actually the villain the story tries to initially make out to be. He's actually a pretty good person, although he does play his role as leader, so he'll make certain tough decisions, but he does it for everyone's benefit. He's not like Shinji's father, who I couldn't stand him. I think he was a bit nihilistic or soulless. I'm not sure. There's also these three people who are kind of all connected, which is the doctor, and again I have to look this up because these names: Itsuki, Makoto, and there's a blonde woman, Helena. And these three are you see them often together in the story. There's a reason why. Obviously, there's a reason for everything. It's called money. No, they're together because of their past. And there's a lot of scenes that remind me of Evangelion where you have the characters that are kind of like spaced out. How do I put this? You'll see like two people like in the background, and then there'll be one person in the foreground. They'll constantly shift the perspectives. There's a lot of that in this story, which is again why I thought it was like Evangelion. And if you've seen Evangelion, you can jump right into the show and feel right at home because they definitely borrow a lot. But again, they add some of their own, so it's not like a complete ripoff. The rest of the cast includes people who also work for Terra. There's like a whole unit of pilots. You have Kim, who's one of the females who works there, who has her own issues, which is kind of interesting. I liked her character a lot. And then the second lieutenant, here it is, Shoji. And then there's like Watari Shiro, he's a funny character. Watari Shiro, he works alongside with Terra, and he plays like this. He plays the like bumbling fool, but also the brilliant strategist. He can switch between the two on a dime. There's a great scene where this reporter's asking about a super weapon, and he's like, super weapon? Man, it wasn't, or a secret weapon. He goes, it's so secret, I didn't even know about it. And he's so convincing it. He really can play two roles. Love the character. I love the voice actor too. Mike, is this here, Kleinhertz? He did a really good job. I like dubbing where you look at the character, you imagine how they sound, and then the voice matches the sound. I absolutely enjoy that stuff. So he's a great character too. I can go all day discussing different people, but the point is, each character I felt was normal. They had issues that I could relate to. I cared about everybody. And that's important. You have to care about the characters to like the story, obviously. That's why there are many stories where I've watched where I don't like it because, again, the characters are bad. That was a bit of John Madden explanation, but you get the point. I missed one character, that's Reika, and she's this female who appears to help Ayato get into the RAXEPHON. That's all I'm going to say about her. Everything else will be spoilers. So she's kind of like C2, if you want like a comparison, because she's this girl who helps out Ayato every single time. And just like C2, she saves him a lot through many of the conflicts in the story. I wonder if Geass took inspiration from RAXEPHON when making C2, because when I was watching, I was like, C2 and Reika are very similar characters. And obviously, like, who they are, where they come from is very different, but a lot of similarities between the characters. So yeah, that's in a nutshell. Good characters. I cared about them. He did a good job with giving the characters like their own individual stories, but everything tied into the major plot of the story as well. So you get a good plot-driven story and a good character-driven story. It's nicely done, perfectly balanced as all things should be. The battles in this story, like I said, it's between the Dolems. So it's the enemy's Dolems and then the RAXEPHON are all interesting. Most of it is mental and physical. Basically, he'll get into a conflict with one of them, and then they will try to do like weird things, like flood the mech, and he'll go into some like weird area, or he'll do some kind of like buried dimension. Like these Dolems they're very unique in both design and also the way they attack. And many times Ayada goes into these weird moments where he starts doubting himself, and he goes into a weird almost dream state, and Reika has to like get him out of it to help him win every single conflict. The battles themselves are actually quite short. It's just that his mental fight is really the longer portion of each one, which I like that. You know, it adds a little bit more pathos to the battles when you know it's like the mental aspect. I thought was more important than the physical. The RAXEPHON itself, since we're going that direction, is really cool. Some people don't like its design. I was reading a lot of negative reviews in response or in preparation for this one. People don't like RAXEPHON's design. They think it's kind of stupid looking. I'll say this much. I've seen many mecha, okay? Lots of mechas. And I'll be watching many more down the road. And I have not seen the anime with the same mecha design as RAXEPHON, except for the one I mentioned before, which is called Yusha Raiden. But even then, that design is still nothing compared to RAXEPHON. I mean, it has like really cool wings, the wings that cover the face, wings that come out the side. It fights. It's like the way you pilot is very organic, because instead of like most mechs where you use the steering wheel or joysticks, whatever, it's just your body. It kind of reminded me of what Escaflowne, where Vaughn would use, like the arms would like connect to each of the Flone. So basically, when he moved, the Escaflowne moved with him. That's how RAXEPHON, it works the same way. You put your arms into it, and you can actually decide how you want to use it. And the RAXEPHON is very OP too. I mean, it can basically do anything as long as you're a capable enough pilot for it. As a whole, like even a whole element of that in and of itself. Maybe the RAXEPHON design is kind of weird. It's still very memorable. You have not seen many anime with a design like that. And this show borrows from Egyptian mythology, which I can't think of many anime that have done that besides Yu-Gi-Oh!, where they used, and Yu-Gi-Oh!, I would say loosely borrows it, but it does. I can't think of any other anime that used Egyptian mythology as like the cornerstone of its design. And it's really cool too. And they even mentioned like, I mean, it's called RAXEPHON, and Ra is, a sun god. So even there, you know what? Let me just make sure I got that right. Ra, it's the king of deities and father of all creation. So who's the sun god? One second. We're getting a little Egyptian lore here. Who is the sun god? I thought that was Ra. It is Ra. Okay, so it's a god of sun and a god of creation. All right. I'm not insane. I learned something when I was younger. So the point is, like, the Ra is like the creation of everything, and there's the whole reason for that too. Again, I don't want to, man, keep going back and forth. Don't want to spoil, but do want to spoil. There's the constant balance between the two. So again, the design is pretty cool. The animation itself, this is another point I want to mention. A lot of people didn't like it when I was reading the reviews, but I think the animation in this anime is perfect. It reminds me of Metroid Fusion, which was an old game that came out in Metroid Fusion. Zero Mission. Zero Mission came out in 2004. I was close. So in Zero Mission, there's a part where she lost her suit, and she had to reclaim it after the space pirate shot down her ship. Anyway, there's a part where you see her kind of like get her suit back, and where she's looking around. I love that style of animation, and RAXEPHON has a very similar style. And I can't think of too many anime that have the same look. I know what it is. Everyone is pleasant to look at. Nobody is like insanely drawn. Everyone is just normal looking. Nice change of pace to watch anime where no one is like supermodels. I mean, I love Bleach and I love Geass, but I'm not gonna lie, people do not look like that in real life. And the one character that do look normal are crazy, like Nina. So it was nice to see a story where everyone just kind of looked normal. There are some women in the story who are physically attractive looking, but again, pretty average. If they were in a show like Bleach, they'd be like in Squad 4 and like low seat. They wouldn't be someone you'd see often. The only other show I can think of where they had a lot of plain-looking characters was Monster, which is why I enjoyed Monster a lot. It's good to see realistic stories. Not to say that no one is attractive looking in the series, but again, it's not overly attractive. Even the girls that are attractive are like, it's normal. Normal people. I respect that. The only thing I will say in against my point here is that sometimes the way the noses are drawn, when characters smile, they kind of look like frogs. It's a weird observation. Like, dude, that's kind of like, ooh, kind of froggy. But other than that, the animation is beautiful. I absolutely loved it. I love to see more shows that share it, because I don't mind modern animation, but sometimes it misses that older style, and I definitely appreciate it. It aged well. Let's go over some cons I have about the series. One major con is that there's a relationship in the story. I won't say between who and what, though I kind of already did, but I won't outright say between two characters, which I thought was kind of weird. Again, I won't say why. And when I was watching the story, I was like, please don't do this. And I'm like, all right, you're doing it. Thanks a lot, guys. So, but the good part is it's like a very small portion of the story, and it doesn't last too long either. And given the context, it's not entirely weird, but it is kind of weird. So I kind of struggle with it. At least they explained it somewhat in the story. One thing about the stories I mentioned at the beginning of this review, you have to watch the anime a couple times. You'll have to look at some guides or watch. I found a good video, actually. I went through the basic story of RAXEPHON, because it is a little complex. Maybe they could have been more direct to how they explain certain things. The pacing of the show, I think, is really good until the last 3 episodes. Then they just exposition dump you to death, and they throw so many things at you. It's like, oh, wait, slow down. What's going on here? And you have to like really pause the show to take in what you just heard, because you have to just, not only do you have to process information based on what the show is saying at the time, but you got to think back everything that happened before to understand what the ramifications of what the person just said. And unfortunately, that means you have to go back through the story to understand exactly what they meant. So it's one of those things where like, I get it. At least things do connect, but I would prefer if they didn't like go so heavy on it. Not heavy with other shows, but just other than that, the show is very well paced in that respect. And I don't think it was overly complicated to the point where you don't get it. That's what I want to say in terms of a basic review of the story. I definitely recommend, if you like mecha anime, if you like anything that's related to Evangelion, you can watch it in high dive, which means you got to pay for it, but I think it's worth it. Although I didn't pay for it myself, I got it from the library. I was lucky to find it there. You might be as well, although if there's also another way you can watch it, you know what I'm talking about, which I won't say out loud, but you might be able to find it that way as well. So that's my thoughts on RAXEPHON. Good anime. I give it 8 out of 10, and I think that's a pretty good review. Most of the time, the show is great. There are elements I didn't like. I listed a couple. Anyways, I'm done rambling about RAXEPHON.